Joining me now is Dahlia Lithwick. She's the senior editor and legal correspondent at Slate, an MSNBC law and politics analyst, and author of Lady Justice, Woman, the Law, and the Battle to Save America. Also with me is Barbara McQuade, the former U.S. attorney for Michigan's Eastern District and an MSNBC legal analyst. Thank you both for coming on. Dahlia, let's start with you. What should we make of the fact that a Supreme Court justice is having dinner with donors that could influence major decisions in front of him? First of all, is this common? Is this common practice? What does it say about the ethical codes of conduct for the court?
I think that's the right framing. I think that the right framing is that there was this massive influence campaign that was going on, that an entity called Faith in Action sets up an office across the street from the Supreme Court. They get donors with vested interest in outcomes at the court to funnel money through the Supreme Court Historical Society, and then they get invited to parties where they hobnob with the justices. They offer their vacation homes for the justices to go have fancy dinners. And then they chat, apparently, about the outcomes of cases in advance of the rulings. I mean, every piece of this suggests a massive, massive campaign to influence outcomes. And also, as you say, that there are people, evidently, who know outcomes of cases before the rest of us.
Yeah, the buying of the property was something pretty wild, something you would imagine in a episode of The Americans or something, but I guess it happens in real life. Had no idea. Barbara, going off of this New York Times report, non-court members, in this case the Wrights, they knew something they weren't supposed to, right? That was the crux of this, is they were not supposed to know what this decision was going to be, but they managed to obtain that and then spread the word. So for the uninitiated, what are the harms here of having prior knowledge of a decision leak out to people like the Wrights?
Well, it's not a crime to know what's going to happen at the Supreme Court before it's actually issued, but people can obtain all kinds of advantages if they know what's coming, especially in these big cases. One is messaging. If they know that the court's going to rule in a certain way, they can take action in support of that and demonstrate their own insights and lobbying influence to others. They can take financial interest. If you know the court's going to come out a certain way, either favoring or opposing some business practice, you can invest in that business practice and enjoy the windfall that comes when you're able to use this insider information to the competitive advantage of everyone else. Politically, if you can see the tea leaves of what's going to happen down the road, you can arrange your affairs in a way to take advantage of it. So it's extremely harmful to American politics and American business when people are tipped off about something as significant as a Supreme Court opinion. So I think it's a very serious problem. Even though it's not a crime, I think it does suggest that we need to reform some of the ethics of the Supreme Court to either prevent this from happening or provide transparency into it.
Well, Dahlia, let's pick up on that because, let's be honest, there's not a system that you can institute where justices are simply prohibited from having dinner with folks, right? That's never going to happen. But what kind of steps could the court potentially institute that would maybe bring a little bit more semblance of, impartiality, more stringent ethical guide rails? What would be the suggestions that you would make about how the court could reform itself to prevent what seems like conflicts of interest or at least reputational damage from stuff like this happening?
I was really struck by your earlier interview about the Justice Department and the decision to outsource the investigation into Donald Trump, because the hallmark here is the appearance of impropriety, right? You don't want to look to the public as though you're in the tank for one side or the other. Well, believe it or not, that's also the lodestar for the judicial ethics rules. Judges, all Article 3 judges, are bound by legal canons and rules that say you cannot appear to be doing anything improper. It doesn't matter whether you are doing something improper, but those canons, those rules, are not applied in anything but an advisory manner to the justices of the Supreme Court. The 9 justices of the Supreme Court, and the New York Times quotes Chief Justice John Roberts, they consult those rules, but they're not bound by them. So I think the essential thing here is, A, to codify ethics rules, as Barb just said, that are applied to the Supreme Court justices and that are enforced as against them. But more deeply, that the court needs to take seriously that their own popularity ratings, the confidence in the institution is undermined when the justices don't care that the appearance of impropriety is in fact being violated by them. So I would say, in addition to transparency, in addition to meaningful reform about disclosures, the most important thing is that the justices take seriously that when they look like they're in the tank for people with vested interest in cases, that undermines public confidence in the institution as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, people need to understand objectively, the Supreme Court is the least transparent of our governing bodies by leaps and bounds. Barbara, could a revelation like this prompt an actual second look at the case law? Obviously, it's years now since this was decided. There's no indication that Alito would ever change his mind. But do you imagine that people who lost the suit or people who are on the wrong side of it may reconsider their legal options in light of these revelations?
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything about this that suggests that Justice Alito made the decision based on any undue influence, simply that he shared it and disclosed it early to people who had an interest in the outcome of the case. And so I don't think it has any legal effect, but I do think that, as Dahlia said, the legitimacy of the court depends on public confidence in it. And so, I've been involved in some reform efforts involving corrupt political officials. And, the answer usually lies in transparency. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. You said we can't monitor who justices have dinner with? I think we can. In the same way we know where the president is at all times of the day. If you want to be on the Supreme Court, maybe you need to disclose those kinds of pieces of information too.
It's an interesting point. I stand corrected. Barbara McQuade, Dahlia Lithwick, thank you so much for coming on. Incredible story. Really appreciate your insights on this. Very valuable.